Good evening, everyone. It's Claudia from Rochills. And tonight I'm joined by our director, Marcel. Do you want to say hi, Marcel?
Hello, everyone.
So we hope you're all having a good week so far. Thank you so much for joining us. So today we wanted to share some guidance and tips and just explain a bit more about the process and how you can make better informed decisions when you're offering. And this is for rentals. This is advice for tenants this evening. Just around the process, making a better decision when you're making offers, and really just what to expect. So before I get into it, just a reminder, I wanted to remind you all that if you know anyone who is interested in today's subject, anyone who's experiencing, similar issues with their letting agents at the moment, or just wants some, free and impartial advice, you can invite them. So just below myself and Marcel, you should see a little profile icon and then a plus button. Just start typing their name, hit return, and they'll get a notification to join us. So hopefully that will help them. And remember, if you guys joining in have any questions throughout today, just drop them in the comments section below. Myself and Marcel will be looking out for those. And we'll try and answer them live for everyone's benefit as well. Super. So I think the reason we wanted to cover this subject today is it can be very difficult for tenants, when property hunting, and it can be very competitive, especially around this time of year, and actually it can be very emotional. If you've done the process before, you know what it's like. So with Marcel with us today, we wanted to give you some tips and some guidance on the process, and also for you to better understand the role of, all the parties involved. So Marcel, can we sort of start at, almost chronologically in the order, how, what sort of tips we have for people who may be looking to rent at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the most common things we find is that tenants are not fully aware of the relationship between the estate agent and the landlord. And I think that's really critical to understand. So just to give you an example, typically a landlord will instruct an agent to try and let their property. And this is what's called a sole agency basis, where basically the agent got an exclusivity to let that particular property. And this is a really important point to understand when you're going through the referencing, or when you actually put in a reservation for a property, to understand that if that property is only on with that particular agent, there is some chance of your property being held whilst you go through the referencing process. I think mostly the problem happens whereby the landlord has instructed a second agent, or maybe a third, or several agents to try and let the property. Now, what happens typically is that the tenant is under the impression that by putting a reservation that actual property has been taken off the market. Well, it probably has with that particular agent, but it may not be with the other agents. And in actual fact, what we find is that the other agents are busy in the background trying to make sure that they get a client rather than the existing agent that you've put an offer forward with. So the one tip is, first question to ask is this property exclusively on with you, i.e. Mr. Agent, or is it on other properties as well, other agents as well?
Other agents, yeah.
But by doing that, at least you know that there is some sort of security that you're, by putting a reservation fee, that actually marketing stopped or whatever whilst the process is going through. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first point. When a tenant places an offer on a property, it's very important that the tenant puts over the case to the landlord to maximise their chance of getting the property.
Yeah, things like being transparent and working with the agents,
Yeah, so full details. I mean, some of the tips that I've written down, make it clear if you have any conditions that you want property. Make it clear the timescales that you can move in. Okay. Make the offer clear, the offer amount clear, with all those conditions. And then also make sure that your character is portrayed in the best way, because what most landlords we find is that they want to know a bit about yourself, about what type of people you are, what you do for live in, and that's not to be sort of personal, but they're looking at the risk side of it. You know, what risks have I got with this tenant? So if a tenant supplies that information, then there's more likelihood that they'll be selected by the landlord. The other is the referencing process. One of the things we like to do is make it clear what the criteria is in terms of what the references are. So what's your salary? What's your salary? Because most references work on a multiple, sometimes 30 times the monthly rent. So there's no point a tenant spending money going through the application process if they're going to fail if they don't meet that particular criteria. The other historic things, it could be there may be some credit issues in the past, whatever. You know, make sure you come clean with all that information. Otherwise, the process will go through, and then you'll hit a problem, and you've actually wasted the cost in terms of, you know, applying, and your credibility goes.
Yeah, I think the point Marcel is also making here is obviously with paying that holding fee, when you go through to referencing, what I had when I was obviously an agent myself, when it came to the letting side of things, is first of all, we also look at, as agents, we need to look at the character of that person for the sake of our client who we're letting the property to. But outside of just the character, it's about how much that person works with the agent. What we mean by that is just be transparent about things like, you know, we had people saying, look, I had a business, it went bankrupt, that will come up my credit. I'm now, you know, earning X amount. So us knowing that, we can forewarn the landlord and make an informed decision. So for an example, when your credit references come back, we can see that will come up on the reference. We already knew that, the landlord already knew that, and they can take a view and say, okay, that might have come up, the affordability checked out, I'm going to take a view because this person was honest, and they work with the agent, and obviously the agent recommends it to the landlord to say this person was completely upfront. It's things like that that sort of helps, you know, with being transparent when you're making offers, and, you know,
transparent, help and work with the agent to try and get as much information as possible for yourself as a tenant to get accepted. Now, it's often the case where tenants place a deposit or a reservation for a property, and then all of a sudden, after going through a certain process, basically they're rejected. Now, what happens in the background is that, you know, the landlord could, you know, these are the scenarios that could happen. The landlord decides, actually changes his mind, doesn't want to let the property. Another scenario is a tenant decide, the existing tenant in the property may decide, actually, I don't want to leave. I want to continue with the existing tenancy. Again, that will mean that it's an aborted process, or it could be that the tenant fails their references. And if you understand that, if a tenant understands that this is the probabilities, nothing's certain until it's all done. The contract signed and agreed. There's nothing you can do. But the situation really is the agent is acting on behalf of the landlord, and it's the landlord that makes the decision. And this is a point that's important. You know, sometimes it's not the agent's fault. It's that ultimately the landlord decides who he accepts, who he doesn't accept,
of course, and
what's going on. And it gets more messy when there are multiple agents involved. Because the landlord is being pulled by one agent and another with more tempting applicants. And the problem is that there's lots of tenants involved, all trying to get property. And in the middle is the landlord making the decision as to which person is the right for them. Which leads to a lot of disgruntled tenants because they've gone through the process, etc. One of the things is, if the landlord changes their mind, we give back the money. There's no point,
to the applicant.
And I think that's important to make clear.
So that's one scenario where they, the way we operate, I think it's very clear to say that this is how we operate with our routing process. So if the landlord changes their mind, the prospective applicant, gets, their holding fee refunded. What would that, just in terms of the scenarios there, where would they get a refund and where wouldn't they? Because I think that's something that there's a lot of grey area, and not all agents are transparent with that off. Not for any reason. I think it's just the lack of communicating when you're entitled to it and when you're not.
Yeah, I think if an application, if the work's been done and the referencings are going through, then obviously that work has to be paid for, if it's accepted or not. However, if the tenant changes their mind, then basically the landlord has lost the opportunity to let it to someone else. Okay, which obviously is a problem, and therefore, you know, there's a cost involved.
Yeah.
The landlord changes their mind, then basically the tenant gets their money back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other scenario it applies to is if the existing tenant changes their mind as well and rescinds their notice.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then, you know,
Same again. Yeah.
same again. Yeah.
So I think it's just that's something that we often, you know, if you're a good agent, like you said before, Marcel, you'll be transparent on the process, what we checked, and also where this would be appropriate as to, okay, you know, we're very clear, you're paying this holding fee on this basis. You know, if you fail references or if you pull out, you don't get this back. There is no refund for it because the work's been carried out. However, if, you know, the landlord or the existing tenant decides not to move on those two scenarios, will you? Because I've seen that, you know, just keeping an eye on different local groups and things, you know, just discussions, and it's something that I just see as a bit of a trend. And I think this is why also we decided to do this, is just to be a bit transparent about the processes as a general, to sort of, you know, so people know what to expect.
Yeah, and I think what one of the processes we put in place is that we have a tenant application form. Everything is documented, everything is written, you know, making clear in terms of the conditions, the time scales that looking to move, the offer amount, if they have any pets, etc. So we get all that information.
Like a pre-qualification form, essentially, yeah.
Which then minimises your chance of a failure later on, because we could look at that application form and say, based upon what you're telling us, we know that the landlord won't accept you because you make strict criteria about no pets, for example.
Yeah.
So we get that information up front, and it may seem like they're asking lots and lots of questions, but what we're trying to do is trying to help to get the application through successfully. And so I think a lot of the mistakes that are made is sometimes things are done verbally. You know, you go into an estate agent, you tell them something, and then the agent understands it slightly differently, goes to the landlord in a different manner, and then there's a problem, which is why we're quite strict with actually making everything in black and white in writing, so that there's no ambiguity, and the, you know, the information that goes to the landlord is full, and that the risks of failure massively reduces. Apart from things like I said, if a tenant changes their mind and wants to, the existing tenant changes their mind and wants to remove the property, that's not within our control. Also, if the another agent is letting the property as well, then again that's not in our control. That's up to the landlord as to what he decides. Now, some landlords they're honourable and they would accept the offer that they accepted, and some landlords won't. You know, they go to the one that pays the highest or whatever it might be, and that's an individual case by case scenario. You know, and we try and advise that. I mean, our job is to advise landlords, look, these people have gone through the process, they have spent their time, and we will try and persuade the landlords to take this particular tenant. We don't know the other tenants through the other agent, and it becomes a bit of a you know, a problem really in trying to get everything agreed, which is stressful, and we feel for tenants.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
the amount of calls, you know, that, you know, I think what's important to mention as well when you've got multiple agency is the stressful thing for the agency as well is we know that there's every added incentive for the other agents to then try and get a higher offer. And, you know, like most landlords, you know, these are ultimately investments, these properties. And some can be very financially orientated to say, actually, you know, that is X amount high. I'm going to go with that tenant or that applicant. So it does make it very stressful for us, but it can be a very difficult conversation to have, you know, and that's why we always say, like Marcel says, if you're seeing on Rightmove that this property is on with, you know, 2, 3, 4 agents, just bear in mind that this does make whomever you offer through, it does take away an element of control. We can recommend you till kingdom come, but, you know, if the other agent is, you know, calling the landlord saying, well, actually, look who I've got, you know, it does make it very difficult, you know, to keep control of that transaction. Yeah,
and I think one of the tips is that if you see a property on with several agents, one of your conditions in terms of putting the offer is that the property is removed from all estate agents.
Good point.
You know, because that way at least, you know, there is a chance that you got one agent going through the process, and it is crystal clear. As long as the tenant supplies all the information. What tends to happen is if the tenant doesn't supply the information or doesn't respond from the referencing company and takes his time, then the landlord becomes worried and concerned.
Yeah.
And that you know, and that means that they're losing marketing time, because at the end of the day, the landlord may have a mortgage to pay and time.
Well, yeah, which often they do.
If they don't get a response, so one of the other tips is make sure you communicate well with your agent, keeping them informed of what you're doing and why you respond. And we understand and appreciate that sometimes people they're very busy, they're working, they've got to fill in these forms, etc. But communications is key. You know, coming back to the agent when they're asking for certain additional information, to build up the confidence for the landlords to say these tenants are serious. You know, they've given us all their information. They made it quite clear what the offer is and the timescales for moving, etc. They're not changing any conditions as they go along, which is another thing that happens. And then the landlord will say, okay, I'll wait for these people. But if we don't get communications and they're changing the goalpost, then the landlord loses confidence. And then
this is a bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that covers pretty much all. I think we made our notes what we wanted to share with you this evening. And if you do, I mean, like I say, if you catch this a bit later on, we are going to be keeping an eye out. We get notifications. Any questions you have, you can either direct message Marcel if you, or this way. You can direct message Marcel if you have any questions, or myself. Failing that, with your tenant or a landlord, give us a call as well. So all our contact details will be below. Calling one of the guys at the office. They love guiding you through, you know, if you are a tenant, you're having a bit of difficulty, we give impartial advice. If you're a landlord at the same time, you know, any issues with any service, you know, at the moment, you should give Marcel a call as well.
It's important that, you know, we supply, it's very important that the tenants are educated in terms of the whole process, because it helps everyone in the long run. I mean, one final point to note, Claudia, is that obviously with the tenants fee ban in consultation at the moment, and it looks like you know, this won't exist in the future. It will be interesting to see how things pan out in that respect.
It will, like myself said, that's actually this very moment that is under consultation. So this is as things stand at the moment, and I think that's a very good point to say that for the moment. But yeah, so hope you found this helpful, everyone. If you want, so beside this video tonight, we've done a few lives. We've got loads of video content and blogs on the Walton Property Community Group, also on Facebook. I'll put the link down below. So go click join. A lot of useful content in there, no matter who you are, tenant, sellers, landlords, investors, anybody, you know, who's looking for property advice. Join the group. Failing that, drop one of us a message if you need anything else after this video, or you can give us a call. I'll pop all the details below. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us this evening. See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.